Miss Brandt.
Yes, Mr. Jameson?
Where's Eddie Brock? He's almost a half hour late.
He said something about hanging out down the street.
What? Oh, that boy's gone soft. Eddie Brock used to look like every man's man. Now he looks like Eric Foreman. And what the hell is up with Peter Parker lately? He's dressed like one of those kids from High Topic or My Chemical Romance.
Isn't that Peter walking down the street, dancing like John Travolta in Saturday Night Fever, except there's no music playing?
He's clapping his hands and shaking his hips like Elvis. What the fuck? Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Good Times with Bad Movies. I'm Tim Morrison, joined by my co-host. His senses are always tingling, Paul Ireland. How you doing, Paul?
Tim, I'm doing great. I'm doing great. Starting off on a fantastic note here already. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing awesome.
That's really good. I'm really excited today. I don't know if I'm actually excited. Maybe I'm feigning that a bit here, but we're in for a real treat today, I think.
I'm definitely excited. This is one of my favorite movies to talk about in general because it's really foolish. For this episode, we chose to do the movie Spider-Man 3, the Tobey Maguire franchise, directed by Sam Raimi, and it came out in 2007, distributed by Sony Pictures. The premise for this movie is a strange black entity from another world bonds with Peter Parker and causes inner turmoil as he contends with new villains, temptations, and revenge.
So let me ask you, Tim, you just dropped an interesting little tidbit there. So you've seen this a couple times. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so do you actually, let me ask you then, do you enjoy this movie?
Oh, yes.
Really? Maybe this is not really a bad movie well, I think it's kind of a bad movie, but I think there's just a lot of things in this movie that to me are very frustrating to watch, and they're really annoying. And this is going to be perfect though, because I've just had it bottled up for a little bit now, so I can just vent and get this off my chest. Because yeah, I'm sorry that I made you watch The Labyrinth. This to me feels like your Labyrinth. You know what I mean?
I can see why any fan of Marvel or Spider-Man would be severely disappointed with this movie, so I definitely don't blame you. I went to see this movie in the theaters when it came out, and at that time I was definitely annoyed and felt like I just wasted my money. But as the years have gone on, I've learned to like this movie for being just a great surprising mess.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to put this. So this is a Sam Raimi pick as well, too. And Sam Raimi's done a lot of cool movies, so I want to get that out right up front here, too, as well. I'm a big fan of the Evil Dead movies. I thought Drag Me Now was, really creepy. That old lady in that movie, ooh, that's some nightmare stuff. I think he's made some really cool and interesting films. This franchise, well, I should say, the first Spider-Man movie, I think where it was, 2002 that came out, that one blew my mind. As just a kid, I've never seen such a high quality take of Spider-Man before that. That was insane. That's its own thing, right? So that was really cool. The second one was all right. And then this thing, I don't know if there's words for this. This is just, you took this franchise and you literally just nosedived it right into, a TNT field.
I thought the first Spider-Man movie was okay. I thought the second one with Dr. Octopus was actually really good. And I think most people going to see Spider-Man 3 anticipate it to be probably the best of the franchise.
I guess so. I'm not really a big fan of Tobey Maguire being Spider-Man. I think that's first and foremost. That's probably why this movie frustrates me a lot in general. And it's so weird that this has become a meme in the last little while, that it's Tobey's my Spider-Man and stuff. And to me, I'm thinking, no. Personally, I know this is a bit of a sidebar here, but I think Tom Holland is the best Peter Parker. I think he fits that role perfectly. I think he plays that role well. He's a very likable guy. And it looks like he genuinely is having fun as this kid with superpowers. This is who you would think was just Peter Parker to me. And I thought also the Into the Spider-Verse was really good too. That's a really well-made Spider-Man movie. It's really interesting. Tobey Maguire he's such a wimpy doofus. He looks like a dope in this whole movie. He looks like I used to work with somebody who had this expression where he would say, this guy looks like he was born yesterday. And that's kind of what Tobey Maguire is. Just somebody looks like he was born yesterday with a stupid, dopey smirk on his face and has no clue about anything.
Kind of while we're still just touching on Sam Raimi a little bit, I think it's worth noting that Sam Raimi himself has come out and said that this movie was not at all the way he had envisioned, in that the studio made him cram in extra villains as well as extra storylines. That's a big reason why this movie's a mess. And visually, it actually looks awesome. I guess my point is, I wouldn't fault Sam Raimi for the demise of this movie.
No. It doesn't seem like, I think Sam Raimi's a terrific director. I think he makes really interesting movies. But I think it's just there's a lot of miscast stuff. And now also we're going to see there's a lot of wacky, goofy montages and things that happen in this movie that are the hallmark of bad movies and things that we have discussed over the course of this whole podcast here. The things that you keep reoccurring that you're like, why did you do that? Why did you shoehorn this in here? Why are there dance numbers in here? All this stuff. We're going to see there is like a litany of these sins in this movie. It's insane. So I could see this has definitely got the fingerprints of studio execs that think they know better all over this.
I think it's time to get into it. You want to dig this?
Can we dig this?
Now dig on this.
So we've both clarified that we've seen Spider-Man 1 and 2, the two previous films. And I think that this movie is going on the assumption that a lot of people may not have seen the first two movies. I was kind of confused at the beginning here where we're just seeing little random clips of the first movie, different scenes of Spider-Man killing the Hobgoblin, Harry Osborn being sad, MJ being sad a lot, Spider-Man zipping around, just focal points of the first two movies. They're showing the whole history of Peter Parker's Uncle Ben when he died.
Yeah, like, as if you couldn't just murder Uncle Ben enough cinematically. How many times, like, I feel between Bruce Wayne's parents and Uncle Ben, have we not seen these people murdered enough already? Can we just stop with it? We can agree, right? Marley was dead to begin with. We know. It's over, okay?
Spider-Man is seen skipping through town, then we pan out and we see that he's actually standing on the street as Peter Parker in the middle of New York at Times Square watching a big screen of himself flying around, zipping around as Spider-Man with all these kids who are watching it. And as the video ends, the kids walk away. And Peter Parker's like, hey, come on, you guys, it's going to start again right off the bat. We find out that Peter Parker is an egomaniac in this movie. I don't know what happened between the first, I don't know what happened after the second movie, but we're going to point out all these different new character traits that Peter Parker suddenly has in this movie.
Yeah, they definitely will. I think the reason they have to do this early on is because you will see later on in the movie, not to really spoil anything, but the alien symbiote that shows up later enhances your personality, or it amplifies your personality and character traits. So they have to set the scene early here that Peter Parker is becoming a little bit full of himself. He thinks his farts don't stink, and he thinks he's the man because, he's kind of got a little bit more confidence underneath him, as he's becoming a budding journalist for Jonah Jameson, and he's, doing well with MJ, and he's getting more confident as Spider-Man himself. I think that he's getting a little bit of an inflated ego. That's kind of, they want to drop that early so that it makes sense later. But the problem is Peter Parker was this humble, nerdy guy, and it's just like, it's stupid Tobey Maguire, and he's just like thinks he's hot, and you're like, you're Tobey Maguire, man.
Paul, he's not in high school, right? Like, is this college?
Yes, I believe he's in university or college. I mean, that's I think when in the first Spider-Man movie, he's on the cusp of high school, university. Now I think he's been in university for a year.
I just have to point out that every actor in this movie looks like they're at least 35 years old.
Oh yeah, everyone's like 40.
Yeah, they're all supposed to be playing like they just graduated high school.
And that's what I mean. The only one who looks like he was born yesterday is Tobey Maguire. And it's just like he's Michael Cera. He's just an ageless person.
Peter Parker is going to see Mary Jane perform tonight at her opening Broadway show, I guess. She's got the lead in a Broadway show. We get our first musical number.
Okay, I don't want to be rude again. Kirsten Dunst seems like a nice person. However, this lady cannot sing.
Well, that's the point. She gets fired hereafter.
I know, but like she's just a singer. That's like what she does. It doesn't, why would you sing if you can't sing? This is like Silk. We've already been over this. I don't want to hear you unless she goes and finds Terrence Howard in this world. I don't think she's going to have much of a shot at making anything out of a music career here.
So while she's singing, we kind of pan up towards the balcony, and Harry Osborn, he was formerly dating Mary Jane in the previous movies. He's sitting up in the balcony watching her perform, and he has the tiniest little telescope that he's using to watch her, which I thought was really funny because nobody else on this balcony anywhere near him is using a telescope.
Does he think that this helps him at all? Because you're right, no one else is using them. And it's why are you just looking through the room for 3 seconds and then stopping?
I think it's just to show that Harry is still very much obsessed with MJ. He also hates Peter Parker. After the show ends and they're walking out together, Tobey Maguire approaches Harry and says, "Hey, Harry, we need to talk. I can explain things." And Harry says, "Bring my father back from the dead." And then he's like, "I can't." And then he goes and then he leaves. Harry Osborn's father accidentally killed himself in trying to kill Spider-Man.
Yeah, no. That's the Green Goblin tried to kill him. Like, I'm sorry, dude, but what are you going to do? Hey, you're defending yourself. He's totally in the wrong here. But he doesn't know that, I don't think, at this point, apparently. But you'd also think, why does your dad have all this weird equipment and these weird, creepy goblin masks and stuff? Wouldn't you be like, this seems like bad guy stuff?
By the way, we're going to be jumping around a lot in this movie because there's just so much stuff that happens. In the very next scene, we see Harry Osborn at his house. James Franco, by the way, that's who's playing Harry Osborn. He is just coming out of a green smoke shower bath.
Your dad has weird green mist and a machine for this weird green mist. This doesn't seem like good guy stuff. You're the bad guy. You should know that. You should know your dad. Well, this is like Scott Evil taking over the Empire. You should know your dad is the bad guy. Throw me frickin' bone here, Scott.
After a romantic night on Broadway, Peter Parker and Mary Jane are hanging in a giant spider web in the trees, making it with each other. Up in the sky, you can just kind of see this little meteor rock type thing. It's on fire. It's pretty small, and it just lands pretty close to Spider-Man's little battery-powered bicycle.
This little moped thing?
Is it a moped? It looks like something you remember, you remember the Shriners when they drive around their little bikes?
Yeah, his little Shriner car. That's what I mean. It's Dopey Maguire and his stupid little Shriner car bike. And his little safety helmet, and he's a nerd. This man is a nerd, and not like a redeemable nerd that you're like, oh, I could believe in this guy afterwards. This is not Steve Rogers before and after Captain America. This is it's almost as bad as Eric Foreman, and he's going to show up in this movie later, too. It's just, who picked these people?
From the rock comes this little black goo that can, crawl around and stuff. And it crawls onto the back of Peter Parker's little moped bike thing. Yeah, and Mary Jane goes scootering away. Now, we are in a different area of New York. And the cops are chasing a convict who just escaped jail. We know this because he's wearing an orange jumpsuit. He manages to outrun the cops, and he goes to his home where his wife and his kid are staying. Wouldn't you think the cops would look there?
Yeah, you think that's place number 1 you would go to.
He was in jail for murder, by the way.
Yeah, I've got a litany of problems with this man and his criminal record and what happens to him later on in the movie.
Meanwhile, his wife's like, "You ain't nothing but a bum. Get out of here."
Yeah, I think he's supposed to be a man looking for redemption, just trying to help his family out. That's what you're supposed to get from this.
There's a quick little scene where Peter Parker goes to have tea with his Aunt May, and he tells her that he is going to propose to Mary Jane. Peter Parker hops on his moped again. Why do we see him on this moped so much? He's Spider-Man.
That's a great point. Because you're right. If I had these powers, that is the number one thing. It's like having a helicopter, and you're like, well, I'm just going to take my rollerblades everywhere. No, you take the helicopter. What are you doing, man? It seems like his little scooter ride is sort of interrupted here by a mysterious person on a green hoverboard.
It's funny here that Harry automatically just reveals himself to Peter Parker.
Harry knows who Peter is, and Peter knows who Harry's dad was. So he knows he still has all the gear and everything, right? So
I don't know if he necessarily knows that.
I think at least if you did know, let's say hypothetically you don't know, That is the number one person I would be like, oh, who potentially has access to this glider? That's like in Gotham again. You're like, oh, so this guy's flying around with planes and disposable cars and boats, and just shoots all these gadgets out. I wonder who could afford all that stuff.
So they have this fight that lasts for about like 5 to 10 minutes, and where they're just zipping around the city, Harry on his hoverboard, and Peter Parker just dressed in the same suit that he wore to the Broadway show earlier. Why in the world are either one of these guys wearing masks?
That's a very good question, too. I don't understand that. I mean, they are flying really fast, so we don't really see these people. But you think, that's right, you would have a vested interest in protecting your identity.
Peter Parker clotheslines Harry Osborn with a spider web. And then from that, Harry Osborn smashes his head on a pipe, and he is knocked out hard. And Peter Parker runs over and puts his ear over to his mouth to see if he's breathing, and then immediately starts giving him chest pumps. I'm pretty sure you should probably check the pulse. But anyways.
Oh, yeah. Like, you know what? He kind of would be dead. He clotheslined him hard, and then he took his face hard off a pipe, and then he fell probably another 25 feet onto a garbage dumpster, which is like, that's solid metal. That's a hard fall. You would be busted up.
So now we're at the cop station, and Commissioner Stacy has a tip that Flint Marko broke out of jail, and he's on the run in the marshlands. So then we quick cut to Flint Marko running through marshlands, and these cops are behind him chasing him, dogs and stuff. And we really don't know where the hell he is. We just know that he's in the marshlands.
So none of this scene makes sense. Nothing in this at all makes sense.
Paul, don't you hate it when you're just like running through the woods or fields, you hop a fence, and then you fall into this giant random hole that's a laboratory?
Yeah. I hate when I'm just walking along and I fall into a particle accelerator out in the middle of a field with just sand right in it in the middle of nowhere. What the hell is this? This is like a machine that would open up a portal to another dimension, and there's just a rusty barbed wire fence and a crappy sign guarding this apparent hole in the ground with this sophisticated machinery out in the middle of the field at night, okay? Of this marshlands. Okay, this is the middle of like tall, knee-high grass. This giant thing in the middle of nowhere. And it's not even like there's other stuff around it that would make you see that this is some sort of particle accelerator. You don't see any part of this. It's just grass and a hole. And then somehow there's this, like, you know, one of those little prize machine claws in the middle, and it's just like whipping up sand. There's nothing that would show you that there's sophisticated steel structure around this, holding this little claw up in the air. There's no lights. There's not even like a warning sign or a barrier around that. And then there's scientists. There's scientists in a lab. Where the hell is this lab that is in the middle of a field?
Yeah, it's like not controlled at all, right? Like a human can just fall into this thing, and they're like, there was a fluctuation. Like, it was probably just a bird.
Yeah.
And then they just like start the machine anyways.
First of all, what is this machine doing? It's just whipping up sand or just electrocuting sand in the middle of this marshland? What the hell kind of science is this? This is like when we were watching Are You Afraid of the Dark and they're blowing up hot dogs in the microwave. What is this science? What is this?
They call it it is a demoleculizer. They are basically taking everything that is in this hole down to its tiniest molecule. And we see him just disintegrate as this prize claw just spins around him.
So what is this sand then? It's not like this is like some sort of like brindlefly kind of thing going on here. Because they don't like, there's not even like there's anything in here. That's what I'm trying to say. They're not doing like a swap, or they're not experimenting on anything. It's just a bunch of sand that they are electrocuting in the middle of a grassy field. If someone can explain what the principles of the science are around that and what it applies to, yeah, I would love to know, because I'm so confused about this.
It would have served this villain's storyline a little bit if they would have actually said like what it was, what kind of experiment that they're doing. Like, you know, Spider-Man was bit by a radioactive spider. This guy just fell into a hole, and a whole bunch of these crazy science things started spinning around him, and now he's nothing.
Yeah, he just controls sand. Can you imagine if that was just a giant litter box that he fell into? He wouldn't be the Sandman. He'd be the shit man. he'd be the scat man, just like that song.
The cops arrive to the fence that he jumped over. They look down in the hole and they're like, we don't see anything. Oh, well, okay, let's go.
It's not even like they question anybody. First of all, I'd love to know, like, what are you guys electrocuting sand for? What is that? And did you see anybody go in there?
So the next morning, we see the sand in this hole. It starts moving and it kind of shapes into this villain, Flint Marko. He's now a Sandman. It takes him a little while to actually like learn how to do it, but he manages to form himself and he lifts up this little locket that his daughter gave him before his wife kicked him out. It's a picture of his daughter. Everything else in this hole completely disintegrated into sand, but that locket stayed perfectly fine.
I was questioning that too. I was like, what the hell is this? How does this thing stay alive? And I mean, also, like, does he get to choose how hard the sand is around him? And is like, do you know what I mean? Because some stuff goes through him later, you'll see, and some stuff he gets to grip. There should be like a hard and fast rule. Is he packing sand? Is he soft sand? Is he sifting sand? I need to know these questions here. Is he get to choose? Are there textures? Are there softer sides to the Sandman? I don't know.
Meanwhile, back at the hospital, Peter Parker is waiting for Harry to wake up. And wouldn't you know it, Harry has amnesia.
He doesn't know anything because he got his bell rung the other night. So he is in another world right now.
Last thing he remembers is that his father died. And that's it. So that it's so weird because so now this whole story is right back to where it was in the first movie.
Yeah, I think it's kind of just to pause James Franco's storyline in this. That's what it almost seems like. They're like, you're just going to go play dumb in the corner for a little bit, bud. What you need to know from that whole interaction is that Peter Parker plays down the fact that Spider-Man had anything to do with his father's death. So now we cut back to Peter's apartment, and he is looking at the ring that Aunt May has given him. And he hears a knock at the door. And it is MJ. So he tries to put the ring away, but he accidentally... It's weird because he's sitting at this desk with like 15 drawers on it. He breaks one of the knobs off of one of the drawers, freaks out, and then puts the ring in his pocket. Not like he opens up any other drawers or there's a book or like anything. He just puts it in his pocket and stands up and opens the door. And anyways, what happens is MJ comes in and she's really upset now because it turns out her Broadway debut was apparently a total critical bomb. It seems like everybody has panned her debut performance. So she's not really happy. And basically, Peter, again, being a dope in this movie, is just like, hey, you just kind of got to accept it. It goes with the territory. It is what it is. And she doesn't want that, obviously. She just wants someone to listen to her and just a sympathetic sort of ear or a shoulder to cry on. And, they sort of have a little bit of a fight now. But it's interrupted because the police scanner goes off and there is a crane that is out of control. So Peter Parker, with the ring in his pants now, puts on the Spider-Man suit and doesn't even like take off his pants. You think that'd be the first thing you do? Because how do you put jeans on underneath such a form-fitting pair of tights? I don't really know, but he does. And he jumps out the window and he springs into action now.
That's exactly what it is. There is a crane, a giant crane in downtown New York that is out of control. The driver of the crane at the very top of it has lost control of the functions, and it is just spinning around in a circle and smashing into buildings. And now we meet one of our new characters, Gwen Stacy. She is at the top of one of these buildings doing a photo shoot, and the crane has smashed through this floor, almost getting her. However, the entire floor of that building is about to fall out the side. Gwen Stacy is just hanging for her life on the edge of it. Now we see her father, the police officer we mentioned a little bit ago, Commissioner Stacy. He looks up with a pair of binoculars. And he says, "Who's that?" And then Eddie Brock comes in and he says, "Oh, that's Gwen Stacy up there." And he's like, "That's my daughter?" He's like, "Yeah." And he goes, "What's she doing up there?" And it's like, dude, she's like hanging from a ledge right now, like about to die. And he's like, why is she up there? What's she doing? She was doing a photo shoot. And Eddie Brock informs her that he's actually currently dating Gwen Stacy. So it's an odd time for like just lighthearted moments right now. It's really weird.
Yeah. So if Eddie Brock.
Yeah. Let's talk. You want to talk about Eddie Brock?
Can I just get this out of the way? Yeah, that's right. First of all, Eddie Brock looks like Eminem in like 2000, dressed with his bleached blonde hair, or kind of like Justin Timberlake, maybe. This is Eric Foreman.
Yep.
This is Topher Grace. Again, you just like give me the nerdiest, wimpiest dudes in Hollywood today. Give me Tobey Maguire. Give me people that look like each other. Give me Tobey Maguire. Give me... I swear to God, if they had cast Jake Gyllenhaal in this movie, I would have been just as confused.
It would be like casting Sheldon from The Big Bang Theory as Bane in Batman. Like, what a poor casting choice.
That would be hilarious. You know what I mean? Like, because he would just hulk up and be like, Bazinga, Batman. If this is your girlfriend up there, wouldn't you be freaking out instead of taking pictures?
He works with Peter Parker, so I guess that's just his natural instinct.
He really looks like Justin Timberlake in NSYNC in this. Like the Bye 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 Justin Timberlake. That is the total vibe he's rocking right now.
It's that spiky gel blonde hair.
Yes, and he looks like such a nerd. Everybody in this movie looks like a dick. I'm sorry.
This movie made a massive mistake in this area, in that, like, it's impossible for anybody who has at least seen that 70s show to not see Eric Foreman. And I'm going to call him Eric Foreman for the rest of this episode.
Yes, he is. It's like when I see Tom Cruise in a movie, I'm like, you're not Ethan Hunt. You know what I mean? You're not Jerry Maguire. You're Tom Cruise. That's who you are. And it's always will be Tom Cruise. I don't see anybody else. You're Eric Foreskin.
Anyways, Spider-Man comes along and he saves the day. He grabs Gwen Stacy and safely gets her to the ground.
And now we cut over to the Daily Bugle. And we meet probably the only redeeming character in this entire movie. And I'm so glad that he is in these movies too. It's the only man that could be this guy. We meet J. Jonah Jameson.
Played by J.K. Simmons.
This guy is awesome.
It's just one of these situations where they found the perfect person.
He is the spitting image of the comic book cartoon J. Jonah Jameson. It is like, it's the same person. It's insane.
He sounds identical.
That's right. This is exactly who you want.
Eric Foreman here, he just started at the Daily Bugle a couple weeks ago. Jameson is so impressed with one of his photos that he's considering on giving him a promotion. Peter Parker kind of pipes up because he's a little bit jealous. Peter Parker's been there for years. So J. Jonah Jameson says that they have to compete with each other in order to get this position. Whoever can get the best photo of Spider-Man doing something incriminating will get the position. Because, as most people know, J. Jonah Jameson despises Spider-Man.
Do they ever explain why he hates Spider-Man? Other than he just thinks he's a menace to society?
You know, I'm not sure. Like, I've never really gotten into, like, the deep lore of Spider-Man. But it's just my understanding that J. Jonah Jameson doesn't like him. I don't know why.
Yeah, it's not like Spider-Man killed his kid or pushed him down some stairs or something. I wonder if he has to create the aura that he's a menace, and because maybe he can't tell his journalists to. I mean, he does tell them to find something incriminating, but maybe he can't officially put that out there. Maybe he just has to put that vibe out there. The Spider-Man's a menace, and that's what they're all going to print.
Yeah, I don't know. So Mary Jane is arriving at her rehearsal, and when she gets there, she sees somebody else, another actress on stage, singing her song that she would normally be rehearsing. The directors kind of start huddling together, and they're like, "Didn't you tell her what she's doing here?" I'm like, "Oh, we must have forgot to tell her agent." So what happened is that they fired her, but forgot to tell her.
Awkward.
Yeah. So as she's walking out, people just start applauding, and she feels so good about herself for a moment until she realizes that they're actually just applauding Spider-Man.
That's pretty good. I like that. Wait, okay, so here's a creepy, sexy sign that's in the back here. There's a big parade going on, and it's like Spider-Man Day, or hey, thank you Spider-Man for saving the town kind of parade. This one sign this lady has in the back here, it says, "Come into my," underlined, "parlor." Come into my parlor. I'm going to leave that there. You guys can all think about that and what you think "come into my parlor" means. I'm going to put out, last episode you dropped 2 words on us. Puppet fetish. This week I'm going to drop 2 words on you. Spider fetish. That's not Webb. He's going to be shooting there.
The society here in New York worships Spider-Man. Like, it's kind of crazy. Kids are talking about how much they look up to him and stuff. There's a whole parade here for Spider-Man, as well as balloons. Like, all the colors are red and blue. Everything for Spider-Man. Spider-Man balloons, Spider-Man colored outfits and uniforms. And this marching band is playing the old classic 60s Spider-Man theme. Da, 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 da. Peter Parker here is just soaking it up. He's standing in the middle of it, smiling, because he knows nobody knows that he's actually Spider-Man. So he can just stand there and just blend in and be happy. And he's so into it that he starts marching on the spot and dancing.
Just smiling and marching like a doofus. Someone else has a sign in the back here that says, "I miss Muffet." So obviously, I think they want Spider-Man to sit on her tuffet. That's what that sounds like. There's some sort of weird rhyme in there. You know what I mean?
So Peter Parker leaves Mary Jane for a moment so he can put his Spider-Man suit on. Meanwhile, on the stage, Gwen Stacy is there with a key because she is about to present Spider-Man with the key to the city. So Spider-Man swings in, kind of strings himself upside down, and says to Gwen Stacy, "Come on, plant a kiss on me." She folds down his mask and they have that little upside down kiss, the same kiss that he shared with Mary Jane in the first movie when they were in the rain. And by the way, Mary Jane is standing here watching this. The girl that he is planning to propose to at any moment, he just kissed another girl in front of her.
The balls on that spider. Can you believe that guy? Like, unbelievable. I mean, like, yeah, again, well, I think they're slowly ratcheting up that level of narcissism in Peter Parker, right? That he just thinks that, like, I'm just going to go make out with this chick in front of the girl that I'm going to propose to.
But here's the thing. Here's why I don't think they are. He hasn't even got the symbiote on him. When the symbiote gets you, yeah, I can see your personality might change and then you're starting to act like an asshole or something. But so far, he's had no...
He's still, yeah, I'm just saying, like, he's really breathing in his farts right now. He's just farting and just cupping them in, being like, I can't do any wrong. Ooh, I'm Spider-Man. That's what's happening. He's just believing in those farts so much that it's making him go crazy. His spider farts. I wonder if that makes his senses go tingle.
Anyways, while all that's going on, down the street, the Sandman is being chased by the cops. He's in regular human form right now, and because apparently this guy can shapeshift to the point where he just looks like a regular human with the same material clothes that he had on when he before he got demolecularized.
Do you wonder when he shapeshifts? Is his skin the clothes? Is his skin a shirt? Can you ever change your clothes at that point if you've been demolecularized with your clothes on? Or is that, I mean, that feels like...
Well, we don't see him wear anything else in the movie, so maybe
I guess
not.
so. Maybe that's it. Maybe he's just like a Looney Tune now. You just don't need to wear pants because you're like a Ken doll.
These cops chase him down the road, and then he hops into the back of a giant dump truck. They flip the cover off of the dump truck. They look in, and it's to the brim full of sand. And now, was this full of sand before he got in? Or was there just happened to be a truck full of sand and he hopped in?
That's a good question. I don't know, because I feel like this truck says something about sand on the side of it. It's like a sand company. They just drive sand around New York for some reason. But yeah, also too, you would think was it filled with sand? If it's already filled with sand and you're sand, how much sand are you? And then... is it going to be overflowing this bucket of sand that's already there? Or are you just a little bit of sand? And then when you get more sand, you're now bigger sand? There's a lot of questions.
I'm going to act on the assumption that there was a bit of sand in there and just enough more for him to get in and blend in with it. Because once these cops, they decide to grab a shovel and go digging into the sand to try and find this villain. And just out of nowhere, all of the sand comes to life, and now he's a giant sand monster. And he can fly and sort of repel himself like a cloud around the city.
It's kind of like in The Mummy.
It is like The Mummy. Yeah, that's a good comparison.
That's what's happening here. It's like he's got mummy powers. He can just turn into a sandstorm and fly away. I mean, I thought it would have been hilarious if they had pulled the cover over and he forgot to turn into sand and was just laying there on the sand like, I don't think they can see me. That would have been an amazing visual for one. But also two, you kind of have them fooled if you're sand. They could sift through you. They're not going to find you. Why did you need to jump up as a giant sand monster and fly away in a big sandstorm? Why would you not just take the path of least resistance and just lay low? And then they would just leave you alone because it's like, oh, it's just a bunch of sand. He's actually not in here. And what guy could just burrow through sand in 2 seconds?
So Spider-Man gets into an accident caused by the Sandman here. Spider-Man survives, but the Sandman is seen kind of like up on a rooftop, sort of just watching from afar. And he just walks away. So, like, what was he even trying? Like, what was the point of any of this? I guess he was trying to steal money from, like, a Brinks truck or something? Why did the Sandman do this during the day when there was a parade for Spider-Man going on down the street?
The worst time you could potentially hijack a truck is right in front of the resident superhero. That's correct. I don't know why that is.
This is where it really started to get confusing. It's straight out of left field, for whatever reason, Commissioner Stacy calls Peter Parker and Aunt May to let him know the man whom they thought killed Uncle Ben in the first Spider-Man movie, he actually wasn't the man who killed him. The man who killed their uncle is Flint Marko, the Sandman. So why did the police just sit on that for 5 or 6 years?
Well, it seems like in a few scenes prior, what we saw was there was a detective who came in and he said that he had a break in the Uncle Ben shooting. I can't really call it. However, I just think it's so weird. They don't really give an explanation of why. It's not like this guy never said he was innocent, or it's not like they had new DNA. For whatever reason, it just seems like there's just one lone cop out there who thinks that Uncle Ben was murdered by somebody else. They don't really explain why this just comes out of nowhere. I also thought this was very confusing, and this is just another shoehorned plot point, I think.
I remember when I was in the theater watching this movie, and it was about right handy to now at this point. We're a good hour into the movie. And I thought to myself, where's Venom? Where's this gooey black little symbiote that we saw follow Peter Parker home earlier? Peter Parker is in full Spider-Man uniform, minus his mask, laying in bed, having terrible nightmares, fantasizing about killing the person who killed Uncle Ben. Again, just like the Green Goblin story with Harry Osborn and his amnesia, now we're right back to the very beginning of Uncle Ben's story too. We're doing the exact same thing that we did in Spider-Man 1.
Yeah, again, we're just reliving this old man being murdered on screen for like the 50th time in this movie. And even in this franchise. Like, how many times? Again, I know I've said this earlier, but do we really need to keep killing Uncle Ben in this movie?
Anyways, he falls asleep and he's having nightmares. And he wakes up standing on the side of a building. Now his costume is black. It's the famous Spider-Man symbiote outfit that most people know of. He's immediately just like pumped for it and starts just swinging around the city going, woo, yeah. And it's not like he's really doing anything different. Most people's introduction to Venom, minus people who are like, faithful to comics and whatnot, most people's introduction to Venom was the 90s cartoon TV show. And there was a significant difference when Spider-Man put that costume on, the symbiote. He had like crazy strength and stuff. But here, there doesn't seem to be much of a difference other than that, well, right now anyways, Peter Parker is just really happy.
Yeah, it just seems like he can jump a little bit higher maybe, and he's potentially somewhat stronger. It doesn't really, it seems like his skills are, you're led to believe that they are greatly enhanced, but you're right, it doesn't seem like anything is happening though. But it doesn't matter because he brings this weird thing to Dr. Connors, and the confusing thing to me was he just had a piece of it. So did he rip off part of his suit or something? They don't really explain that part, but he's got a little piece of this symbiote, and Dr. Connors is looking at it under a microscope, and he's like, hey, Peter, you should really make sure this doesn't get on you. And Peter begins to question that, and he goes, really? Why not? And I thought to myself, like, okay, I'm not somewhat of a scientist myself. However, I think I'm smart enough to realize that you just don't put alien stuff on your skin, okay? You don't know what the hell this weird, black, creepy, gooey thing is. Why would you let it at all go on you? That's a no-brainer. You don't need a PhD for that.
Like I say, he tells him, don't touch it.
This guy's an idiot. He's like, well, I mean, isn't Peter Parker supposed to be a scientist? Don't you think he would recognize that?
He's supposed to be very smart, yes.
He's supposed to be in university for science. I'm not in university for this stuff. Right after Dr. Connor says, do not get this stuff on you, Peter. It might be really hard to get it off you. He says, okay, thank you, Mr. Scientist. I'm also a scientist. Puts on his symbiote and jumps out. And just starts flying away now.
Yeah. So Spider-Man follows this little sand dust trail into the sewer and into these subway lines. He confronts the Sandman here and basically tells him, hey, you killed my uncle in cold blood. And he says, no, it wasn't like that. And they just end up having a giant fight. And they're zipping all over this. Paul, this is the craziest subway area I've ever seen. They're going up and down, like it would almost seem like hundreds of feet into the ground, into this sewer system that looks like a labyrinth.
Yeah, this is like either a Mario Kart level track here or the Seven Dwarves mine or some kind of ride at Disney or the Ninja Turtle sewer. This is insane. The levels of tracks and water lines going across this place. I don't know what the hell this thing is supposed to be. This is the tallest sewer ever. They have a big old sand fight now.
It turns out that the Sandman is just as vulnerable as the Wicked Witch of the West. Because as soon as he gets touched with water, he begins to melt and just disintegrate. And Spider-Man opens up a giant valve where a whole bunch of water comes pouring out, and the Sandman is just completely washed away, and I guess he's dead.
I love this next little random scene that you see here. After Spider-Man kills, potentially, Flint Marko, he's now... he's all walking away now, like he's really tough and he feels all energized and stuff. But he's got this evil kind of look on his face. And the top of a button of his shirt's all unbuttoned now, so he's a bit of a rebel. And he stops in front of this mirror in this alleyway, this random mirror sitting in an alleyway, and looks at his little hair, and he turns it into an evil, emo kind of Tom DeLonge haircut. And this is the start of what I would call, I'm going to term, evil emo Peter Parker. It looks like he's got a little bit of like smoky sort of eyeliner stuff going on here. Honestly, I wondered a couple times if the guys from My Chemical Romance stole their look from Peter Parker in this movie. Like he's gonna break out into Helena in a second here.
After that's finished, he decides that he's not liking this new look. He likes his hair better the way it was before. So he takes the symbiote off and he puts it in a suitcase in his closet. Mary Jane is a little bit put off by Peter Parker and his egotistical antics lately. So she contacts her former lover, Harry Osborn, and he says, hey, come on over for dinner. We'll make some food. They're hanging out in the kitchen, and they play the song The Twist by Chubby Checker. And then they both start doing the twist. What is the point of this? By the way, they played the entire song. This isn't like, this happens in like 30 seconds. This is like a whole nother musical scene.
It's like the dance routine from Pulp Fiction.
Who in the world, like with the people who are writing this movie, were they thinking like, man, I bet people would love it if we threw in like The Twist by Chubby Checker and had Mary Jane and Harry Osborn dancing to it?
That's a good question. I feel like there's quite a few of these musical breaks within this movie. This movie's like 2 hours and 10 minutes. I don't know if they just thought these musical montages would be a way to pump up the length of this movie. I really don't think we needed to spend much more time in this than we already have. I just like, stop with musical numbers.
Yeah, stop it with the music.
Stop it. Yeah, that's right.
So anyways, then they ruin supper. They try to flip the omelet that they made and it goes on the floor. And then that creates a little bit of a sexual tension and they get close and they kiss each other. And then Mary Jane instantly regrets that and runs out. And that sends Harry into a little bit of a psychosis episode where his father appears to him in the mirror and starts talking to him. And instantly his amnesia is gone. It's over.
Yeah. He's walking around with a giant decanter of like whiskey or, I mean, he's rich, so maybe it's some sort of fine scotch. I don't know what it is. But yeah, it's like he's just walking around drinking a little bit and hearing Willem Dafoe's voice in his head. And that's enough to somehow snap him out of this amnesia.
Here we are again. It's like deja vu. We're like back where we are at the very beginning of the movie.
Yeah.
Harry Osborn now wants revenge on Peter Parker.
Yes. We wasted an entire hour and 25 minutes. I don't know what this is, just to get to this same point. We were at this point 5 minutes in the movie. We're now at this an hour and 25 minutes into the movie. Wow.
So Mary Jane goes home to her apartment, and it's completely dark. And out of nowhere comes Harry, and he's dressed in full goblin uniform with his hoverboard, and he grabs her by the throat, slams her against the wall, and says, "You're going to do something for me." And it's like, what is going on? He was hiding in her apartment on a hoverboard this whole time, waiting for her to come home? One would assume that he's probably going to use her to lure Peter Parker into the open so that, he can kill him. So, a few minutes later, Peter Parker gets a call from Mary Jane to meet her at the bridge where they shared their first kiss in the first movie.
Again, being under the impression that this is some sort of trap, right? Which is weird because you're like, this is the middle of a park here, a very busy park in the middle of broad daylight. What's going on here? Why would James Franco do this? Why would he set up what you would think is a trap? It's a very confusing scene because it's not a trap. It's in fact Peter bringing flowers to Mary Jane, and she basically tells him that there's somebody else and to pound salt, and she runs away and cries. This guy presumably broke into her house with his little snowboard that flies around. We waited till she got home in the dark, flew at her, attacked her, and then demanded that she show up at the park the next day and break up with Peter. This man is supposed to be a supervillain. Break up with your boyfriend. If you don't, I'll totally ruin your credit score. And you're like, oh my God, please don't do that, you evil genius. Like, what was this? What is this?
He really, really, really wants to hurt Spider-Man's feelings.
What?
Harry Osborn invites Peter Parker to have a coffee. So they go and have a coffee, and Harry Osborn's basically like, I am the other guy. I'm the one that Mary Jane's in love with. Peter Parker's sad, and then he leaves, and he decides, you know what? I might as well put that alien on my skin.
He's right. He's going back to Hot Topic, and he's going to turn into evil emo Spider-Man. It looks like this man should have a MySpace account right now. That's what Peter looks like. He's just like this little emo kid with black little tight jeans and a little stupid sweater and his hair combed over like Tom DeLonge style. And this man, I swear to God, he's wearing eyeliner. He's wearing eyeliner. And he showed up to James Franco's place to try to intimidate him with eyeliner.
They're fighting here in Harry's apartment. Just trash in his place. Peter Parker eventually gets the better of Harry, though. And Harry grabs one of his father's old pumpkin grenade ball type things. He throws it at Spider-Man. Spider-Man catches it with a web and repels it right back at Harry. And this grenade blows up inches from Harry Osborn's face. So I guess he's dead.
Remember this, folks, this moment here. I just want you to remember that, okay? Harry Osborn threw a jack-o'-lantern grenade at Peter Parker. So, at the beginning of this, I mentioned there's a specific point in this movie that I would always hit, and I would just tap out. And I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I cannot go on with this movie. This next scene is literally the same spot, and it's the only reason that I keep tapping out of this damn movie. It's the only reason I've never seen this movie up until watching it for this podcast, where I strap myself down like I was in Clockwork Orange, and I just forced my eyeballs open to watch this thing and just stared at it. And this is the reason why I stop every time. And I think we need to just take a minute here, Tim, and I think you need to just break down in real time for everybody what happens as Peter Parker now seemingly struts down the road in New York here.
So this scene immediately goes into another musical number. It's a very jive swinging jazz tune. And we kind of see the little bit of a montage of things going on in Peter Parker's life right now. First off, we see him just being very egotistical and nonchalant, like not caring about things, just eating these cookies that this girl is bringing. And he's constantly going on about these cookies. And the noises that they make are really odd. You just hear him going, yeah. Oh, yeah, those good cookies. Yeah. And she's like, oh, yeah? Yeah, you like the cookies? Yeah, they're good. They're good, aren't they? And he's like, will you go, hey, babe, go get me some milk. Go get me some milk. She's like, oh, yeah, I'll go eat some milk. And then they go. So then it goes to him, and he's walking down the street like John Travolta in Saturday Night Fever. He's strutting just as enthusiastically. Like, I would dare say he's actually more enthusiastic than John Travolta was. He's throwing finger gun signs at people, left and right. I'll tell you, that is some cringy stuff.
It's just, there's a shot where they just focus on his stomach, and he's just doing finger guns left, finger guns to the right, pointing to the left, pointing to the right, and he is doing the most. This is cringe-inducing. It took me everything in me to not gouge my eyes out.
Yeah, and then as he's still walking and strutting, he stops and just kind of takes a little Michael Jackson slide and turns around and just like startles these two girls and decides to walk into this clothing store. He walks in and within 5 seconds walks back out with an even darker hipster suit on. and he throws his hands up wide in the air like if you were doing like the YMCA, and starts clapping and shaking his pelvis, like just swaying round and round and round and clapping. It's one of the cringiest things I've ever seen. And you know what's funny? Also, not that it would really make this scene any better, but it's in broad daylight. And you also know that we hear the music, but let's just say that this is actually reality. Spider-Man, Peter Parker here, is just walking down the street in silence, just throwing his pelvic around at girls and throwing gun signs at people and just clapping as if he's like at a concert or like the star of a show or something like that.
I know Sam Raimi enjoys slapstick, goofy comedy. This just seems too cringy and stupid for him to be like, you know what would be a great scene in this movie? Like, I feel like, I don't know, this has got to be a note from a studio. So as if they couldn't make your skin crawl any tighter, and they just couldn't make you wince harder at the screen. This was so hard. This was like 10 minutes. I had to just dig down deep into my soul and just plow through. Another cringy scene. Peter is going now. He's taking out Gwen Stacy, and they're going out to a jazz club or something. And now Peter is just going to start talking like he's got cool, hip language. And like he's just the coolest guy ever. It's like they took a nerd and they were like, what is something that cool people say? Like no one that wrote this movie was cool. And they had no idea what anything that was cool, what a cool person would say. They had no touch with reality. They were just like, what would somebody who is from Mars, if they showed up here today and you're like, well, here's something cool and be cool in 3 seconds. Here you go. Like, I feel like that's what you got here is Peter Parker doing all of this.
So the reason why he's actually at this jazz club is because Mary Jane is a singer there now. And just when she's about to sing, she opens her mouth, and then there's this crazy piano lead playing, this like jazz going on. And we look over, and it's actually Peter Parker. He's interrupting her and showing off his awesome jazz skills, his improvised jazz skills, right? So as soon as that happens, he's like, dig on this. And he hops up on the stage. As soon as that happens, he strikes a pose on the stage and the spotlight just goes on him. I don't know who's controlling this whole set. Like, he completely just ruined this performer's show, Mary Jane's performance, right? But I don't know. They're just going along with it and they're like, okay, let's put the spotlight on this guy. So from there, he jumps off the stage, grabs a chandelier, and swings over to the other side of the room where he proceeds to slide and kind of dance around. He's doing a lot of Michael Jackson moves, but it's not really dancing as much as it's actually a lot of posing. It's a lot of like 2 steps and, hey, look at this. And then a couple more steps and spin around. So like, shove my pelvis in the air a few times. And people are going nuts. They love it. This isn't even a performance. He's not singing. He's hardly even dancing.
Well, this is what you do to somebody who doesn't know how to dance. You're just like, here is fake dancing. Can you do this? This whole thing is so weird. Like, he showed up at this club, and this place was a packed joint. And he goes up to the bartender, and he's just like, hey, find us some... First of all, he said, find us some shade. That's a table. That's his cool hip lingo. And then he called her hot legs. Okay? And then he slipped her like a $5 bill.
Yeah, he did call her hot legs.
He called her hot legs. Said, find us some shade, hot legs. Like, that's like, you're right. That is like a 1930s lingo. Hey, find us some shade. Hot legs, shade, right? And then he goes up on the stage, plays some old-timey jazz. He fake dances around the place. To
be in the writer's room, just to be a fly on the wall for this, when they were coming up with this scene, I would just love to see that. And I think, I just wish that we would know, like, where did this start? And how did this end up like this?
Yeah, he could speak like it's the 1930s, and he's going to a speakeasy, and we could have him just swing around on a chandelier. I cannot believe anybody watched this, greenlit this, and said, please, could you keep this in the movie? Because we really like this. This is a 2 hours and 10-minute movie. We need to keep every second of all of this crap in here.
We got to have the jazz scenes, and we need to see Peter Parker dance. So Gwen Stacy leaves. She's appalled, and she leaves. The bouncer comes up and steps in front of Peter Parker and says, "Do we got a problem here?" And he says, "I don't know. Do we got a problem here?" And he starts fighting the bouncers until Mary Jane comes in and tries to break it up. And Peter Parker grabs her and shoves her to the ground.
Well, he accidentally hits her, because he's just trying to fight everybody now. This guy thinks that he is Patrick Swayze in Roadhouse. He thinks he can just come in here and just cool the joint down. And he accidentally just gives Mary Jane a hard shove and she falls to the ground. And Peter realizes what he's done. And he feels like a dick because he looks like, could you imagine this guy? This is insane. The ego of this man. Could you imagine if Tobey Maguire, dressed like this, walked into this club, did all of this crap,
shoving girls around? Yeah.
Yeah, and then ran up to Mary Jane at the end of it and was just like yelling at her, and then shoved her on the ground. What would you think of this man? This man is unhinged. This man is unhinged. He needs to see a doctor, a professional.
So now he's sad, and I guess he wants forgiveness, so he decides to go to church.
That's right.
So he's here at this church at the very top, and he's just trying to get this symbiote off of him, and he can't. When you know it, Eric Foreman here is Eddie Brock. He is also taking the advice to ask for forgiveness. Well, not really. Actually, he actually just came to church to pray. And he's there alone in the church, or he thinks he's alone, because they actually just coincidentally happen to be in the exact same church at the same time at like roughly midnight or something. So Topher Grace prays to God. He's on his knees and with his hands together, and he asks God to please kill Peter Parker. So Peter Parker is in the bell tower of the church, and the bell starts going off. And that drives the symbiote crazy. It becomes loose enough that Peter Parker is able to rip it off, and he's throwing it in the hole into the bottom of the church. And he's screaming while this is happening. Eric Foreman here hears Peter Parker screaming, and he's like, "Oh my God, God answered my prayers. He brought him right to me, and he's dying." And you can hear him up there screaming. He goes, "Peter Parker?" And then the symbiote, pieces of the symbiote land on Eric Foreman here, and he gets covered in venom, and he's like laying on the ground, and it's all dripping off of him, and he's starting to come alive, and then he looks at us like he breaks the fourth wall and looks at us and screams at us and jumps at the screen, and then the scene ends. He wants to kill Peter Parker. He knows Peter Parker's up there. But I think everybody in the theater expected them to fight.
You've got a good point. It's very strong reason to believe that Peter Parker is no more than 50 feet above his head right now.
So from that scene, we go to another alley in New York City where Eddie Brock here, played by Eric Foreman, is now Venom. And he meets with the Sandman to ask him if he wants to partner up and kill Spider-Man together. I just don't understand why he even needed to go through this. Why? He knows that Spider-Man is Peter Parker, I think, doesn't he? Or maybe he doesn't.
I don't know. How did he even find the Sandman? It's not like, it's not like you just call this guy up or you email him or something. And how do you just find this sandy guy in the middle of New York City?
Oh, yeah. I was also surprised, too, that he's alive. Like that whole fight they had earlier where Spider-Man seemed like he legitimately killed him. He completely disintegrated into dust and went down the drain, a large drain. And now, days later, he's just back. He got put back. He came out of a sewer somewhere, and now he's just back together.
Here's a question, too. How much sand do you need to even have this guy be the Sandman still? And because it all gets spread out everywhere. So is it just little random particles of sand that you need? Is it just one couple sentient grains enough that they go together and then... I don't know. I don't know how the Sandman, I think, is a stupid villain. Honestly, I really just don't like this guy.
Well, in this form of him, anyways. Arguably, though, I would actually say he's the best villain in the movie.
So it looks like the Sandman and Venom have teamed up, and they're now wreaking havoc in downtown New York. And conveniently enough, Peter is just putting his little spider jammies away, and he's got the TV on, and he sees that Venom and the Sandy guy are downtown again, wreaking havoc. And in the little web that Venom has sort of made it says, Spider-Man, stop us if you can. And there's a close-up, and there is MJ sitting in a taxi. Somehow they've kidnapped her way up top. Do they know that MJ is a significant person?
Well, they do now. It's written right on there, right? He wrote it on the wall.
So now Spider-Man shows up, and he starts to save Mary Jane, I guess. And when you know it, Venom is waiting in the shadows there, and he just jumps out and attacks Peter Parker.
He's sort of getting the better of Spider-Man, but fortunately, MJ finds this cinder block and drops it off the roof, and it lands on Eric Foreman's head. So they both kind of free fall fight to the bottom of this giant construction site. And now Sandman is in humongous form. He's like King Kong size. And he's just trying to punch Spider-Man. Like he's just trying to literally try to squish him like a bug. Like he's big enough that he should be able to just like turn into a big giant wall or a wave of sand and just bury Spider-Man. Why is he trying to punch him? And he's missing and destroying buildings. How many people are dying here, by the way? Like the civilian, casualties must be through the roof.
Yeah, why don't you just suck this guy into your sand gut and just hold him there for like 5 minutes and you will die of just, you can't breathe in that. He could do a million things to this guy. They're just slowly, it's just like, it's a superhero battle. You have to do something that's not really going to work, but kind of is effective until the superhero rallies around enough, and then they can kick your ass and save the day. I thought it was kind of funny because the Sandman right now, he looks like a giant gingerbread man. He doesn't really look like he's a sand clump. He looks like the gingerbread man from Shrek.
Yeah. So out of nowhere, a pumpkin grenade comes flying and hits and gets embedded in the Sandman's head, and it blows up. And portions of his head explode, and then there's like a fire in his head, and he proceeds to kind of just die and disintegrate into sand, like a sand pile. And sand doesn't burn.
No, not really.
You can't light sand on fire.
No, yeah, you're right. I think that would have to be some serious heat to burn that sand off. I think. I think you're right there.
Yeah, he burns them up.
Yeah, part of one's on fire. Maybe there's like newspaper in there or something. I don't know. Maybe we'll be generous that way.
Yeah, I guess. Could be garbage. Maybe a little bit of garbage and stuff mixed in the sand.
And it looks like, old Scarface, Harry Osborn, is fighting this gingerbread man. Honestly, his face in this, it looks like the Jason Goes to Hell version of Jason. It's all bubbly and like kind of smushed in. It looks like just weird. Kind of like the Thing from Fantastic Four. It's also what he looks like, too. It's really weird. It's crazy. And it's just a giant monster fight. And again, he's got no mask on either, right? Everyone is taking pictures right now of Harry Osborn up there flying around in this little snowboard. And he's got no mask on. And would people be like, oh, maybe that guy, the Green Goblin, who was here like 2 years ago, who tried to murder a bunch of people and died, maybe that guy is related potentially to the snowboard guy up in the sky, who apparently is Harry Osborn, whose dad was somewhat of a scientist and also was potentially super rich and had green gas chambers in his house.
Well, and eventually here, Venom gets a hold of Spider-Man and unmasks him.
Yeah.
During all this commotion, some pipes have fallen, and they've created a little bit of a ring, and the symbiote on Eric Foreman is reacting the same way as it did when it was on Peter Parker, when the bell was ringing. So Peter Parker kind of remembers this, and he's like, he has an idea. So he starts just implanting these metal poles in the ground around him. I guess they're in wood or something. I don't know. But he's basically making kind of a little bit of a fenced-in circle.
Yeah, it looks like he jams a bunch of metal conduit into the ground and just makes a little cage around him. Once this giant clanging is happening enough, it kind of starts to separate Eric Foreman from his suit. And Peter Parker pulls out Eric Foreman, and he's trying to separate him hard from the suit, and his suit's fighting against him. And as he does this, Peter's got a little jack-o'-lantern grenade, and he throws it at the symbiote. And as it's about to blow up, doesn't Eric Foreman go, and he jumps in to try to save the suit, and he blows up with it.
It's crazy. He jumps in the body. Eric Foreman kills himself because he wanted that suit back so bad that has he even had it for a day?
I think he's had it for maybe 24 hours right now, it seems like.
Yeah, I feel like that's an overreaction because I mean, would you really be that attached? Peter Parker took it off and put it in his closet for like a week.
Through this fight scene, which has gone on for probably about 6 minutes in this movie, James Franco has been laying on the ground. And you would think he's still alive, first of all. This man is dying right now. And it's been like 6 minutes. And every so often they'll go back to him. And he's just still alive. Okay? And now what happens is the Sandman shows up. Okay? And they have a conversation. And Sandman tells him, I'm really sorry about killing your Uncle Ben. He said it was an accident. What happened is he went to grab the car after they robbed the bank. He pulled out Uncle Ben. And Uncle Ben was trying to talk him off the ledge, basically. And his partner, the guy who kind of looks like a thinner Guy Fieri, comes out. And he, I guess, startles this guy. And he accidentally shoots Uncle Ben and kills him. And they get into the car and drive away. And he said, hey, man, I'm just doing this because I wanted to help out my daughter who's sick. Okay? And Peter just takes all of this in. And he goes, I forgive you, which is very nice. And that's a very grown-up move. And I can respect that part. However, what he does next is he lets him go. This guy is a supervillain, okay? I don't care about if you're trying to save your daughter, whatever, blah, blah, blah. You almost murdered, I don't know how many hundreds of people in this city here while you were destroying all this stuff, right? And Peter just lets it go. He just says, it's all right, man. You're just trying to help out your daughter here, even though you jeopardized the lives of thousands of people and you've murdered a couple other people in the process and you've just committed a bunch of crimes. Just disappear on yourself. It's okay. See you later, man.
I know that, like, accidentally shooting someone isn't as bad as intentionally shooting someone. But when you're in the situation where you're actively mugging somebody and you have a gun and you accidentally shot them, I don't really... You telling me it was an accident wouldn't make me feel much better.
He sat there and went along with this guy who had an alien thing attached to him. They hung a car up, I don't know how many hundreds of feet above a bunch of people, okay? They just started fighting in the middle of the street, just throwing a bunch of stuff around with no regard for anybody's safety. Okay, all this stuff should be factored in to the idea that he's just going to let old Sandy Pants fly out the side of this building and just go away. And just let him go. Yeah, it's incredible that was the moment, and we're just supposed to be okay with that he just let this guy go. When is this going to stop? And also, too, you need to also pay for the crimes that you committed and the other things you did to people, too. You know what I mean? Like, this man, it's not like he turned himself into when the other guy died and he just let him go. And now he served his time or whatever and he's out and like, oh, give me a second chance. Whatever. None of that stuff. That didn't happen.
This guy deserves to be put into a sandbox for life.
Yeah, or a kitty litter or something. I think that's what you need to do. Just catch crap on him for the rest of his life. Meanwhile, though, this incredible jaw-dropping revelation has just gone on here. And James Franco is still dying.
He's just been there dying. They were standing around talking, and he's been over there dying the whole time.
Do you remember when Will Ferrell was in Austin Powers, and he was that guy who just refused to die? This is who James Franco is right now. He's just like, you shot me. Why would you shoot me? I'm still alive.
So, yeah, he's just there dying the whole time while they're talking. So they eventually go over, and his last few words, which he probably could have had a lot more to say if they would have been paying attention to him.
Or called an ambulance.
Yeah. He has a few last words, and then he's gone.
Yeah, there's Tobey Maguire blubbering like a loser. Just
I got to say, his crying's really bad.
It's really bad. It's really bad, and he looks so stupid.
Yeah, he's not a good crier.
It looks so goofy, and it looks so overdone. And also, too, you could have saved this man's life. You have the capacity to drop this man literally hundreds of feet in a matter of seconds to safety, to potentially some sort of paramedic waiting down there. And you stood up there the whole time, and you got some lesson of life from the Sandman. You stood there and watched him go into the distance for like 30 seconds, which could have been the 30 seconds you had him down on the ground. They just let him die.
Now we go to a funeral. There's really nothing to say other than that it's just a funeral. And then we go to our final scene. And what more of a fitting way to end this movie than with another jazz tune? So I guess this is the setup to the sequel where Mary Jane gets her mojo back and she becomes like an awesome singer again. I don't even understand this. So Mary Jane's a successful singer now, even though she was terrible at the beginning of the movie. She's somehow good now.
You're mediocre at best. Congratulations. You can sing in a jazz club now and make $50 a night. That's your happy ending.
They dance a little bit, and that is the end of the movie.
Thank God. So that was Spider-Man. So that happened.
The first two movies, I'll agree with you that they're not the greatest, but in the time when they came out, they were a big deal. Like we hadn't seen any other kind of portrayal of Spider-Man quite like that. The first two movies were consistent with each other. This third one, what in the world were they thinking?
Was this like a thumb in the eye to the studio where Sam Raimi was like, oh, you're not going to let me do what I want to do? Well, screw you, I'm going to make something just stupid and goofy?
That could be it. The movie kind of does play out as though the writers just gave up halfway through and they were like, okay, fine, you want me to do this? I'll do this. Here it is.
Right? Yeah. It's like, again, you're right. Like, it's just to touch upon what you mentioned earlier. It's like I remember seeing this when it originally came out. This was billed as like Venom is the guy in this movie. You're going to see Venom. He's going to be in this. This is a Venom movie. And he's in it for like legitimately 20 minutes at the end of this movie. You get a dark Spider-Man suit with kind of the Venom logo on it. But other than that, at the end of the movie, it's Venom for like 20 minutes.
Anyone who's even just a little bit familiar with Spider-Man would know that like a little bit of fan service would be show Venom in his symbiote form.
Yeah, well, definitely, you definitely got to do that more. I mean, like, there was a lot of stuff going on in this movie, and it just didn't serve it well at all because you had to be in all of these different places. So maybe it's hard to wrap up trilogies like that. You know, you've done well for the first two movies, and then the third one, that's really, you got to make your mark and kind of put it all together. It would have been interesting if they had have made Harry actually the Hobgoblin in this, and they had have given him the suit and he took it to that next level. That would have been really interesting to see more of.
And it's weird to tease that but not really go all in on it. Like, they really didn't commit to any of the characters. They just put them in there. And I don't think anybody was asking for that story to continue either. Like the whole Harry and Mary Jane, Peter Parker love triangle.
Yeah, I know. That's also that's one of those, again, that's one of those weird things. That's like Archie, where you're like, who's dating Veronica? Who's dating Betty here? I'm really confused about this. I mean, I know they play with the timelines and stuff too with a lot of this stuff, especially in the comics as well too. There's all these different, Spider-Verses and stuff, and that's interesting. In this one, it's not. I think it's cool. It's a nice wink to be like, hey, here's Eddie Brock, here's Gwen Stacy, here's a couple of these other characters that you didn't get to see as well, right? I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah, yeah, a little bit, but it was just shoehorned in. Like, it wasn't well thought out. Eddie Brock as Venom in his suit, like you said, he was barely in it for maybe 5 minutes. It did not meet expectations at all, but it gave us a whole bunch of other weird things that you never would have expected.
It's just a lot of cringy moments in this. Like, just the crazy crammed in plot line. That's one thing, okay? That's a whole other mess unto itself. But just like that you just put all these musical numbers in and you just made this guy this stupid emo guy who just kind of speaks like he's cool or something, but he's not cool. It's really embarrassing, and it was like really cringy to watch some of this stuff go on here. I'm just wondering if it was supposed to be tongue in cheek or if it was supposed to be someone's legitimate take of this is going to be cool slang and lingo for this person to use.
Well, I want to say it was probably neither. I think it was a lot of people giving up and a lot of other people that just wanted to see certain things but really didn't know the ramifications that it would have on a movie. Because this movie is so weird. I think it'll probably go down in history as just one of the most bizarre superhero movies out there.
And it's such a lackluster ending to the whole series as well too, that Harry dies. That's one thing. You just let the Sandman go, and I guess you guys are gonna hang out and potentially continue to date, and that's it. That's where we're gonna end this movie.
Yeah, he didn't propose to her. We didn't see them get married or anything.
Yeah, and it's just like he just kind of got rid of the suit. That was it. We didn't really see anything else. It's not like, I mean, it's, you already have that hero's journey in the first movie of learning to harness the powers, but then like it's not like you see Peter become humble again at the end of the movie and kind of smarten up.
He just took it off, and that was it.
Yeah, they didn't really write that ship at the end of the movie either. They just kind of left it as hey, maybe he's a dick. We don't know. There's the end of the movie. Ba-da. Like, it's a weird ending to this movie. I don't know how to say that any other way than just disappointing as well. Maybe we could say is too. It's just a frustrating movie to watch, and I'm at least happy that I got to see it through all the way because I had heard that it was really bad. I know people had problems with the way Venom looked. I actually didn't mind it too much in this. I'm like, that's not bad. Like, considering the graphics at the time as well too. The design is not the Venom I would have picked, but it's still a pretty serviceable Venom. I just think he was just underutilized in this movie, and it should have been its own thing. You didn't need all this extra crap. You didn't need all these storylines going on. It's way too much.
No, not at all. Yeah, I gotta say, there's one thing I love doing. If I find out one of my friends has never seen this movie, but they know all about Spider-Man and Venom and stuff, I like to ask them, like, just think for a couple minutes of what you think Peter Parker looks like in this film when Venom gets him, like what he acts like, and they're like, okay. And then I immediately go right to the scene where he starts dancing down the street. Like this, according to the writers in the studios of Hollywood, this is what they think happens to you when you come in contact with a symbiote.
Yeah, if you had some evil alien coursing through your body, making you stronger and darker as a person and more evil, you would just walk down the street and dance randomly. That's totally what you would do.
You would strut.
Yeah, you would act like you're John Travolta and just walk down the road to just invisible music.
When you go to a jazz club, you just turn into Fred Astaire and start dancing all over the place.
But I think maybe this is a good place to leave this. I don't know. Do you have anything else to say about this, or?
No, I think that's it. I think I'm done with Spider-Man for a little bit.
All right. Well, I think Peter Parker is going to see you out on this one.
Thanks, Hot Mix.